Hello there and welcome to another feature preview for Empire at War Expanded. We're going to be looking at this in Thrawn's Revenge, but keep in mind that this applies not just to Thrawn's Revenge, but also to our other projects including Fall of the Republic, Revan's Revenge, and anything else we may or may not be working on. We've spoken a fair bit throughout the development cycle of Thrawn's Revenge 1.0, or Thrawn's Revenge 3.0 and Fall of the Republic 1.0 about working on certain galactic mechanics, so government mechanics and some other stuff, to help bring some life to the galactic level. In previous releases, we introduced things like influence, which we're fleshing out more with this release, but today we're going to be talking about resources. So if you have played any games other than Empire at War in the RTS or 4X genre, then you're probably familiar with most of them having more than one resource type. In Empire at War, you really just have credits. You can sort of count population capacity, but fundamentally you just have credits as a spendable resource. And so we have fleshed that out a bit more into some other resource types. So there are two overall categories for this. First off, we have spendable resources, and then we have rolling resources. So we'll talk about the spendable resources first. The first and most obvious of the spendable resources are credits, which are fundamentally unchanged from the base game, but on top of credits, we now have the ship crews resource. You can see in the top left corner here how many ship crews you have, and these are used when you're doing things like purchasing ships, but also for performing boarding actions with boarding shuttles, and for certain other things. You make and spend ship crews in a similar way to credits, just through kind of different specifics. So each of your government buildings will give a certain amount of ship crews. You can see it's +2 per week for the Moff Palace. There's also cloning facilities. So if you control planets like Wayland or Camino would have it, Columbus, then you get a significant boost to your ship crew production. I believe it's +30 for cloning facilities, but there's also structures like the Naval Academy, which add 10 ship crews. This is mislabeled. It says pilots trained, but that's for a future version. So you get 10 per Naval Academy, and you're basically choosing different ways to invest your credits or your ship crews or what you're going to be focusing on, because certain planets will obviously help you out more with credits, certain will help you out more with ship crews, and you can kind of plan which ships you're building based around what ships or what resources are available to you. So there can be a benefit to building certain ships if you are making a lot of credits. Certain other ships may be more useful if you are making a lot of ship crews. So if you're kind of low on credits but high on ship crews, you may lean more into ships like the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser. And this can pretty heavily influence the choices you're making as you are going through the game. It'll help shape which planets you're going to be going after, which ships you're building, and it also helps with certain things like story objectives, where we're able to give either credits or ships themselves or ship crews as rewards and have it make more thematic sense for what you're doing. It basically gives us a few more levers to help control the galactic economy and give the player a bit more to think about with where they are attacking and how they're managing their economy. So the second category that we are talking about are rolling resources. These primarily impact the influence level you have on planets. You see here we have influence level 6, and resources are one of the main adjustments that factor into the influence level for planets. If you have high influence on a planet, then you may get certain rewards like being able to build unique ships on Mandalore, or if you have lower influence, then you can have some other problems with the planet that can be up to and including revolts, which we're going to cover in another video. So for this release, the two main rolling resources we have are food supplies and industrial supplies. The reason they're called rolling resources is because you're not really building a stockpile. So you don't have, like you have with credits or ship crews, an amount that you're making and then just adding that up. You have a certain amount that you're spending and a certain amount that you're making every week. If you have more than the amount that you are spending, then you get, see we have a net here of 1 or a net here of 6. If you have more than 0, then you're getting +1 to your global influence. So every planet goes up 1 influence for each resource you have above 0. If you are lacking in resources, which come from things like farming buildings and industrial supplies would come from the factory, then you will have a slowly increasing negative bonus or negative modifier on your influence. So if you are just conquering the galaxy and not paying any attention to your infrastructure, not building them up, or not protecting planets that have your economy on them, you could quickly find yourself in a situation where your planets are not being supplied properly and they become upset with you. So it can seem like a lot to manage at first, and all these extra screens that are popping up are going to be removed. Just have to fix part of that there. But it may seem like a lot on the face of it, but when you start playing with it, you'll get used to the idea that you just kind of need to pay a bit of attention to how fast you're expanding, how much you're spending on your infrastructure, not just leaving planets fully open for reasons beyond just having them immediately taken. If you are keeping a reasonable track of how many planets you're taking, how many barracks you're building, how many factories you're building, then you'll be able to keep these in hand relatively easily. Just have to make sure that you're protecting those factories and farms. On top of the cost coming from every individual government building, because when you establish a government on a planet, you have to keep it up. You have to keep it supplied. So you can see the government buildings cost 1 food per week and an industrial part per week. There are some other things that cost those resources as well. If you build a barracks, that's going to cost an extra food per week. If you build a lighter heavy factory or advanced factory, those will cost industrial parts per week. So if you're trying to go really deep into extra production to speed up production, you have to make sure you have the economic backing for it. There are also some planets, like Coruscant you can see here, which have a basic modifier. So here on Coruscant, we have -10 food. So if you're going to take heavily populated worlds like Coruscant, you'd better have the farming backup for it. But if you go to other planets here, like Yukio, there is a +10 food modifier on it. So you can plan your attacks on certain planets to line up better. And if you're going to go for larger planets, you'll have the extra slots for the resources, because you could build some factories or some farms on Coruscant, but they're going to cost a bit to upkeep, and you have to make sure you're going to be able to keep them supplied. So again, it may seem like a lot of extra stuff to do on the face of it, but once you're in and playing, you'll have a pretty good idea. And if you ever need to check, like, hey, do I need another farm? Do I need another factory? You'll be able to just jump into the tab here and see at a glance how your resources are doing and where they're going. So there are other things that will be built into this system. We want to make sure that it's still relatively approachable as we work out any balancing modifiers for it and get people used to the systems. In the future, there will be some other resources that factor into the rolling side as well as the spendable side. The spendable side is only going to be one more that we'll talk about after these versions release. But the rolling side will kind of vary based on not just the mod you're playing, but if you are playing different factions, they may factor into your government a bit differently. So the corporate sector authority, for example, will a bit more heavily rely on different types of resources. Or if you're playing, say, the CIS in Fall of the Republic, you may not have to worry about food as much because you're using a bunch of droids. But that basically covers the general system of resources here. We are going to have a few more government mechanic previews coming up in the near future. But you can see I guess I need to show off how the resources actually work. So you can see we have 110 there. Now we have 80 because the ISD costs 30. And yeah, they basically just work how you'd expect there. Although one downside of it right now, or one downside of it in general, is that we're not able to show ships that you can't afford. So if these costs, say, 30, but you only have 29, then they wouldn't show on the build bar. So make sure you're keeping your economy up if you want to see everything available to you. That's just a downside of how things like this have to be implemented in Empire at War, but we feel like the negatives to that are more than outweighed by the positives of having the extra systems in place. But yeah, so you'll be able to get certain things like this as rewards for missions. We'll have certain things like the Back to War Galactic Conquest or Back to War storyline, where another resource like Bacta would come into play either temporarily as part of the entire GC. So there's a lot of flexibility with this that can add a lot of depth to the Galactic level. But that's going to do it for today's preview video. Hope you guys are looking forward to 3.0. You'll be able to see a lot of this stuff in action with the New Republic preview playthrough that's going to be starting on the channel within the next week or so. Until then, thank you for watching and hope to see you next time.